I'm the outback historian, and you can't get more outback than being beside the Black Stump. The idea is we're going to go for a walk down here, and as we walk I'm going to tell you a yarn. It's what I was talking about this week when I was out at Burke. It's about a young bloke who came from Ireland to Australia back in the 1850s. Just penniless young bloke really, and he walked all the way up from Melbourne to his uncle's property at Horsham. Had started work there, but proved himself to be a very, very good farm worker, rose very quickly to be an overseer, and what he showed a particular skill in was irrigation. And it wasn't long before he was working on a big property up on the Murrumbidgee, and not long after that he owned it, he had a share in it. So his name was Samuel McCaughey, and his uncles began to develop big stations. This is in the stage where Australia was booming and in terms of industry, and McCaughey was on the cutting edge. So he took his skills to another level when he got properties out at Burke. He got to a point where by the 1880s he was owning land, 3.25 million acres of land out the back of Burke, and had the biggest sheep station in Australia. He was shearing something like 250,000 sheep on his own place, 3.25 million acres. Well, to do that he had to use his other skills, which was not just surveying and irrigation, and he did that as well. Sank the first artesian bore, one of the first in New South Wales, certainly in Australia, and that water began to feed this massive sheep. But to manage that large amount of wool, he had to have shearers, and he decided he would use this newfangled thing called the Wolseley shears, which was mechanical shearing. And so on Dunlop Station in 1888 he had the first full mechanical shearing was carried out on his property, and he tripped the switch with the shearers, because the shearers were this large group of men moving up and down the country, pretty independent, didn't like being told what to do, and they were beginning to form into unions. And the pastoralists on their side, because there was industrial trouble, and also eventually by 1890 there was quite a big depression, formed a union to fight the shearers. So McCaughey was the head of the pastoralist union, and another guy called W.G. Spence became the head of the shearers union. I'll tell you his story another time, but McCaughey was a Presbyterian Christian, and he saw himself using his skills as a industrialist, and he could build machines, he could sort of manage these vast properties, and he saw himself sort of expanding the kingdom of God as he used his skills to bring industry and work and wealth to the country. He was investing in the common wealth of Australia, not just his own. So even though he was in this industrial collision with the shearers union, he also had a heart for the working men. They liked him, the men that worked for him liked him, and he had a great sort of philanthropic edge to what he did. He wanted to help, he loved helping people, and that showed out towards the end of his life when he had these massive properties and he developed all these farms, but he decided he was going to distribute them or sell them as an older man and give that resource away. And so what he did was he thought very carefully about who he would will it to. He was a single man, and the interesting thing is he gave it to charities like the Salvation Army or Bernardo's Homes, because he was always sensitive to, like himself, penniless young people. And then the Salvation Army, of course, the Presbyterian Church. He invested in churches, he invested in the money in education, so in some of the big schools, particularly in Sydney, Scots College and the like, and then eventually universities as well. But one of the great things he did was during the First World War, a lot of boys lost their dads, so the young blokes without fathers. So he He gave money for a fund to invest in training young men and women, particularly young men in apprenticeships. By the Second World War and past that, he actually apprenticed something like 22,000 young men had gone through this scheme, and he blessed the country with his resource. Well, when you think about a man with that kind of vision for Australia, and if you go to the Narandra church, you'll find on the front there's a plaque there that says, when he opened that church, he said, I'm hoping that this will be a place where families will come, where mothers and fathers will be strengthened, children will be able to thrive, and they'll serve their master, Jesus, and have used their lives well. Well, you've got to tip your hat to this guy. He gave away £2 million in trust back in 1919, which has probably turned over into, I don't know, hundreds of millions. He may be the Bill Gates of Australia, really. But I love his heart. He was great at what he did with sheep and machines and farms, but he was investing more than anything in people, and that tells me he was a true follower of Jesus. So you might remember, if you're going down through Leeton or the MIA, you'll find a statue of him there near Leeton. You go to Yanco Agricultural College, that's his home, and over the door it had Vici, I have conquered. He felt like he used his skills. He came with nothing, left the country richer and better and wiser, perhaps, by investing in education. So he's one of my heroes, Samuel McCaughey, and you should know his story. I'm the Outback historian, Paul Rowe.